$0. That may turn out to be the most expensive number in the global AI race. For nearly 2 years, the conversation sounded simple. The United States had the world's most advanced AI companies. China was supposedly chasing from behind. Premium models would dominate because better technology naturally wins. Then something unexpected happened. A Chinese company called DeepSeek started making powerful AI models available for free across more than 140 countries, while many businesses outside the United States were still trying to understand OpenAI's pricing tiers, API costs, subscription limits, enterprise licensing, and regional availability. That's an odd picture. One side is asking, how can we recover billions of dollars in investment? The other is asking, how many people can we get using our ecosystem before anyone else does? Those are completely different games, and history suggests the second strategy deserves far more attention than it receives. Think about what happened with Android. Google didn't charge phone manufacturers billions for the operating system. It spread it everywhere, knowing that controlling the ecosystem could become more valuable than selling the software itself. Whether DeepSeek intentionally follows the same playbook is still open to debate, but the comparison is difficult to ignore. That raises a question most discussions skip. What if AI isn't becoming software? What if it's becoming infrastructure? Because countries don't usually pay a toll every time they use electricity. Businesses don't negotiate every search query with an internet company. Infrastructure becomes valuable precisely because everyone builds on top of it. If AI follows that path, the company or country that becomes the default platform may gain advantages extending far beyond chatbot conversations. Developers write applications around it. Universities train students on it. Governments experiment with it. Startups build entire businesses around it. Changing later becomes expensive, even if a better alternative exists. That is why this story matters far beyond Silicon Valley or Beijing. It's about digital dependence. The obvious response is that OpenAI still leads in many benchmark categories: enterprise adoption and cutting-edge reasoning models. That's a fair argument. It has attracted tens of billions of dollars in investment and remains one of the defining companies of this technological era. But markets have repeatedly shown something uncomfortable. The technically superior product doesn't always become the dominant platform. Remember Netscape or BlackBerry? Technology leadership and ecosystem leadership aren't automatically the same thing. Here's another detail worth noticing. Many governments across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East are trying to expand AI access without dramatically increasing public spending. If one platform offers capable models at little or no cost, while another requires expensive subscriptions or enterprise contracts, budget discussions become surprisingly straightforward. This isn't necessarily an ideological decision. It's often an accounting decision. And accountants rarely lose arguments against engineers. There's something quietly ironic about all this. For years, the debate centered on who could build the smartest AI. The conversation is gradually shifting toward who can afford to let millions of people use it first. Those are not identical competitions. Personally, I think too many analysts are measuring this race with yesterday's scoreboard. Model benchmarks are important. Innovation absolutely matters, but adoption has a habit of rewriting the rankings. A platform used every day by hundreds of millions of people accumulates feedback, developers, applications, and habits that are remarkably difficult to displace. Still, before concluding that China has discovered the perfect strategy, we need to answer a more difficult question. How can DeepSeek afford this? Training advanced AI models costs enormous amounts of money. GPUs aren't free. Data centers certainly aren't free. Engineers expect salaries. Electricity companies also enjoy being paid. If the service is free for users, somebody is paying the bill. Finding that answer changes how this entire story should be understood. The simplest explanation is that DeepSeek is giving away AI because it can. The more interesting explanation is that it may not be trying to make money from the chatbot at all. That's a very different business model. When people discuss AI companies, they often assume they're all competing with identical objectives. They aren't. OpenAI has raised enormous amounts of private capital. Investors naturally expect returns. Building frontier AI models requires staggering sums of money, advanced GPUs, massive data centers, networking equipment, electricity, research talent, and constant retraining. Every new generation of models pushes those costs even higher. That creates pressure. Not tomorrow, today. Subscriptions, enterprise contracts, API pricing, and partnerships aren't simply revenue streams. They're part of the financial engine that keeps the next generation of models alive. DeepSeek enters the race from a different position. Instead of focusing entirely on maximizing subscription income, its strategy appears aimed at maximizing adoption. The company also attracted global attention by claiming that one of its flagship models was trained at a fraction of the cost many analysts assumed was necessary. Some researchers have debated exactly how those costs should be interpreted, but even critics generally agree on one point. DeepSeek demonstrated that capable large language models can be built far more efficiently than many expected. That alone changed the conversation. Suddenly, the question wasn't just, who has the biggest GPU cluster? It became, who actually needs one? Efficiency matters because every percentage point saved on computing costs makes wider deployment easier. If inference, the cost of answering user questions, becomes cheaper, serving millions of users becomes less financially painful. There's another layer that receives surprisingly little attention: open source models. Unlike fully closed ecosystems, many Chinese AI companies increasingly publish model weights or make their systems broadly available for developers to modify. That creates a community effect. Thousands of programmers improve tools, fix problems, translate interfaces, optimize performance, and adapt models for local languages without waiting for the original company. One company writes the foundation. Thousands of developers expand it. That's difficult to replicate with a purely closed platform. Of course, openness also has drawbacks. Governments worry about misuse. Companies worry about losing competitive advantages. Security researchers raise legitimate concerns about malicious applications. Those debates are real and shouldn't be dismissed. But openness has repeatedly accelerated technology adoption. Look at Linux. Decades ago, few people imagined an open-source operating system would quietly power much of the world's cloud infrastructure. Today, enormous portions of the internet run on software that anyone can inspect and improve. History doesn't repeat perfectly. It does enjoy borrowing ideas. There's another reason free access matters, especially outside wealthy economies. Imagine you're launching a startup in Kenya, Indonesia, Brazil, Pakistan, or Nigeria. Your first concern probably isn't whether one model scores 2 percentage points higher on a benchmark you've never heard of. You're wondering whether you can afford to build your product. If every API call eats into a tiny budget, growth becomes difficult. If an alternative dramatically lowers that cost, the decision often makes itself. This is where geopolitics quietly enters the room. Countries across the global south are investing in digital education, government services, healthcare systems, and local AI applications. Many of them don't want to depend entirely on one foreign technology ecosystem, regardless of whether that ecosystem is American or Chinese. Cost, accessibility, language support, and local customization all influence those choices. DeepSeek's broad availability gives those governments another option. Whether that option becomes dominant is still uncertain, but simply existing changes negotiations. Think of it this way: if there is only one supplier, the supplier sets the terms. If there are two credible suppliers, the customer suddenly has leverage. That's healthy competition. There's also an irony that's hard to ignore. For years, Washington tried to slow China's AI progress by restricting exports of advanced chips like NVIDIA's most powerful accelerators. Those restrictions unquestionably created obstacles, yet they also encouraged Chinese firms to pursue software efficiency, hardware optimization, and alternative engineering approaches with greater urgency. Necessity has a habit of producing unexpected engineers. I'm not suggesting export controls failed completely. They certainly increased costs and delayed some projects. But the assumption that restrictions alone would permanently freeze China's AI ambitions increasingly looks optimistic. And that leads us to an even larger question, because free AI models are only one piece of the puzzle. The real contest isn't about who builds the smartest chatbot. It's about who controls the ecosystem that businesses, governments, researchers, and developers quietly begin depending on every single day. And once that dependence takes root, changing direction becomes far more difficult than downloading a different app. There's a temptation to frame this as another chapter in the US-China technology rivalry. That would be too simple, because the biggest winners from cheaper AI may not be either country. They could be everyone else. Think about what happened after smartphones became affordable. The companies that built the phones made money, certainly, but millions of businesses that had nothing to do with manufacturing suddenly had access to a computer in every customer's pocket. Ride-sharing apps, mobile banking, online education, food delivery, digital payments, entire industries appeared because the platform became accessible. AI could follow a similar path. If capable models become inexpensive, or even free, the real explosion may happen in industries that haven't been transformed yet. A hospital in Vietnam could build its own diagnostic assistant. A manufacturer in Mexico could automate quality inspections. A logistics company in Kenya could optimize delivery routes using AI without paying enterprise-level licensing fees. The value shifts from owning the model to building on top of it. That's where the conversation becomes much more interesting. However, this is also where DeepSeek faces its biggest challenge: trust. For multinational corporations and government agencies, performance is only one consideration. They also care about data security, regulatory compliance, intellectual property protection, and legal accountability. Those questions don't disappear simply because a model is free. An executive choosing an AI platform isn't asking only, which one writes better code? They're also asking, where is my data stored? Who can access it? Which country's laws apply if something goes wrong? Those are difficult questions, and they're worth asking regardless of whether the company is American, Chinese, or European. This is where OpenAI still holds meaningful advantages. Years of enterprise partnerships, integrations with major software providers, and familiarity among large organizations create momentum that isn't easily replaced. Businesses tend to be conservative. Once an AI system is embedded into thousands of workflows, switching providers becomes expensive, not only financially, but operationally. That kind of inertia has real value. Yet there's another side to the story. Many countries don't want their entire digital future tied to a single supplier. The European Union is investing heavily in AI regulation and domestic capability. India continues supporting its own AI ecosystem while encouraging local language models. Nations in the Middle East are funding massive AI infrastructure projects through sovereign wealth funds. They're not necessarily choosing sides, they're trying to avoid having only one side. Remember that question from earlier? Who is actually paying for free AI? Here's where the answer becomes less about accounting and more about strategy. Sometimes a company accepts lower short-term profits because it expects larger long-term gains. Amazon spent years prioritizing growth over earnings. Google offered services that generated little direct revenue because they strengthened its ecosystem. Microsoft bundled products that reinforced Windows. The profit wasn't always in the first transaction. It emerged from everything that followed. If DeepSeek becomes the default platform for developers across dozens of countries, future opportunities multiply. Cloud services, enterprise support, customized deployments, industry-specific applications, partnerships, and entirely new businesses can grow around that ecosystem. Free access may simply be the entrance fee. That doesn't guarantee success. Far from it. Building a global ecosystem is extraordinarily difficult. Maintaining world-class models requires constant research. Competitors aren't standing still. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, xAI, Meta, and several others continue releasing increasingly capable systems at remarkable speed. This race is far from settled. In fact, I think many headlines make the same mistake. They treat every new model release like a final score. Technology rarely works that way. Remember when people declared social media finished after Facebook? Then TikTok reshaped the industry. Remember when search engines looked untouchable? AI-powered search is already forcing established companies to rethink decades-old business models. The rankings keep changing. My prediction is that the next phase won't be decided by benchmark charts alone. It will be decided by developers, millions of them. Because every developer who chooses a platform writes software that influences thousands of users. Those users influence businesses. Businesses influence governments. Governments influence standards. One decision quietly becomes millions. That's the network effect both Washington and Beijing understand very well. The real question is, which side has the more sustainable strategy once the excitement fades and the bills start arriving? That's where the story takes its most unexpected turn. Here's the irony. The AI race may ultimately be won by the company that convinces the world not to think about AI at all. Look around you. Most people don't spend their day thinking about operating systems, internet protocols, or cloud infrastructure. They simply use them. The technology that becomes invisible often becomes indispensable. That may be where this competition is heading. If DeepSeek continues expanding globally while improving its models, it could become the default AI layer for millions of developers and businesses. Not because every benchmark says it's the absolute best, but because it's available, affordable, and easy to build upon. At the same time, writing off OpenAI would be a serious mistake. It still possesses extraordinary strengths: world-class research talent, strong enterprise relationships, deep integration with Microsoft's ecosystem, and access to massive financial resources. Many Fortune 500 companies have already invested heavily in OpenAI-powered workflows. Those investments won't disappear overnight. This is why I don't believe the AI race has a clear winner today. In fact, I think we're asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, which company has the smartest model, we should ask, which ecosystem will people quietly depend on 5 years from now? Those are very different questions. My prediction is that AI will increasingly split into two worlds. One will focus on premium enterprise-grade systems designed for corporations willing to pay for cutting-edge performance, security, and reliability. The other will resemble the Android model: widely accessible, highly customizable, supported by a massive developer community, and used across much of the developing world. Both can succeed. History has room for more than one winner. But there's another lesson hiding beneath this entire story. Governments can slow technological progress through regulations, export controls, and trade restrictions. They can influence markets. They can shape incentives. What they rarely manage to do is stop determined engineers from finding another path. Sometimes that path is slower. Sometimes it's more creative. Occasionally, it's cheaper. And every so often, it changes the competition entirely. Whether DeepSeek ultimately becomes the world's dominant AI platform is impossible to know today. The technology is evolving too quickly, and the market is still in its early chapters. But one conclusion already feels difficult to argue against. The global AI race is no longer about who can build intelligence. It's about who can distribute it. That's a contest measured not only in billions of dollars, but in billions of users. And if the next generation of AI spreads the way the internet or smartphones once did, future historians may spend less time comparing benchmark scores and far more time asking a simpler question: who got there first, and who made sure everyone could actually use it? We'll find out soon enough. If you enjoyed this analysis and want more deep dives into the technology and geopolitical shifts reshaping the world, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more to unpack, and this race is only getting started.